This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Plain Talk. I'm Rob Port. Joining me is State Representative Dave Nehring. He is a Republican from the central part of North Dakota. He's in District 8. Dave, how you doing?
Really good, Rob. Appreciate the opportunity to be on with you today.
There's a lot going on in our state right now. I don't know how things are going. Because of where you're from, energy is important. You come from a legislative district that covers a lot of people who work to provide us with energy, a lot of people who mine coal, a lot of people who use that coal to turn it into reliable electricity. And so I know that you have been very active in state politics with regard to wind energy, and I think share a lot of my concerns about this political push towards wind energy. I know you have, I have as well, been saying for years that this is going to make our grid less reliable. This is not a good idea. Things do not end well when we make decisions in a marketplace like energy based not on real-world considerations about what works and what doesn't, but on political preferences. I feel as when we're looking at the Southwest Power Pool, I've been getting phone calls and emails from friends and readers and listeners all morning telling me that their power's out, that they've got rolling blackouts. And again, the Southwest Power Pool, which covers portions of North Dakota, announced blackout for the first time in their history, as far as I know, announced rolling blackouts because they don't have production to meet demand. Dave, I feel like the chickens are coming home to roost, and I take absolutely no delight in saying that.
No, I agree with you 100%. We've been talking about this issue for some time, and thanks for the plug on District 8. District 8 has two amazingly effective employers in North American Coal and Coal Creek Station. They do great service, but lignite isn't important just to District 8. It's important to our whole state. And you look at the economics of lignite energy and the reliability and the resiliency, on and on and on. And I've got books full of information talking about where we're going with intermittent sources of electricity and what it's going to do to grid reliability, resiliency, what it's going to do to the cost of electricity. I'll try and share some of those with you today.
I don't know that a lot of Americans or a lot of North Dakotans spend a lot of time thinking about energy, right? You get up in the morning, you flip on the dining room light or something, it comes on. Your furnace was running all night and keeping your house warm while you were sleeping. You open the refrigerator, the eggs are nice and cold because the refrigerator's been running. We don't spend a lot of time. We take that for granted.
Those quite honestly are luxuries compared to some of the other things that we take for granted, such as hospitals being able to provide oxygen, air conditioning on brutally hot days, keeping the cattle waterers on for our ranchers, and all that at an affordable cost. When you look at, I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, especially with what's happened over the last couple of days. When I watch or read the news reports on what's going on now, I often hear the term unprecedented. These weather events are not unprecedented. In the past, they've been rare, but not unusual. Pretty soon, unprecedented will become rare. Then rare will become occasional, and then occasional will become the norm. If we continue down the path of removing our reliable, affordable, dispatchable baseload sources. In the past, the impacts of these events were not as much of an issue as they are now.
And that's what frustrates me when they talk about unprecedented weather. I mean,
yes,
I don't think that's true even down in Texas. It's extremely unusual. But they've had weather like
Sure.
that before. I mean, they've had bizarre
Absolutely.
weather, snowstorms. Usually, when we hear about power outages related to weather in the past, it's been something that's not related to power generation. Something that's more maybe related to its transportation, which would, like, transmission lines get blown over, or the ice tears them down or something. And that's unfortunate, and that's not great. But this is really the first time, and I don't want to say the first time, but I mean, what we're facing here is a much different animal. They don't have enough energy for the grid. They don't have enough energy for the grid.
Okay. Yeah, in the past, the impacts of these events were not as much of an issue as they are now. And why is that? Because we've tweaked the energy system to the point of breaking. Take a look at the states with the highest percentage of intermittent sources. Texas, Iowa, North Dakota. We are on an unsustainable path to grid unreliability, and we've been warned time after time. But events like this show us that this is the proof. There's no doubt about it.
So what do we do about this? We are where we're at now. And listen, I've been in the trenches as well. At times it can feel like we're banging our head against the wall.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, when you read in the news media, even when you hear, I was just reading, somebody was posting documents from Xcel Energy, talking about how they're not gonna give coal preference anymore. They're gonna preference other sources of power. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, do you people not realize that this is politics? People keep saying that it's coal. It's the marketplace that's driving coal off the grid, but it's not the marketplace, or it is the marketplace, but it's a marketplace where the government has its finger on the scale, right? The government has been through mandates and subsidies been promoting one type of energy over another, but that type of energy they've been promoting is not an equivalent type of energy. It's not a baseload energy, and here we are. We don't have enough energy for the grid.
It goes beyond government, though, Rob, and it's the narrative, and the narrative has been massaged to fit the agenda. If you look at, I'm glad you brought up Xcel. I was looking at some stuff recently on a webinar that they did for the Midwest Governors Association, and this was back in 2019. Xcel claimed that they were showing a bold vision. The bold vision was 100% carbon free by 2050. So what does that look like? At 100%, they'd have to overbuild the grid by 8 times what it currently is. 8 times as many transmission towers, 8 times as many transmission lines, 8 times as many substations, as many intermittent facilities, on and on and on. That's just at current demand. Okay, so then we throw in all the EVs, the electrical vehicles. And then, so let's say that we just double that. So 16 times as many wind facilities, 16 times as many transmission towers. At some point, when do we be able to use our ag land for ag production as opposed to energy transmission? I mean, it's going to get to that point if we don't take a look at what we're doing.
Do you feel when I hear them make those promises, though, I feel like they're making the promises without really thinking about how we're going to get there? I think it's a nice press release they could put out there. It's so far in the future that most of the executives who are making these promises probably aren't even going to be working at these companies anymore, or even alive. I think they're just satisfying certain political demographics. The problem is in the short term, they do have to make moves that are in line with their promises.
There's no doubt about that, and that's exactly it. But an additional piece of this webinar would be the pricing. Now, if we look at an 80% intermittent mix, and this is using Xcel's numbers, it became evident that only the wealthy could afford the heat, the lights, the AC, and all of the other luxuries such as TV, cattle waterers, things like that. At 80%, the cost per megawatt went from $50 to $450. So take it times 9. Now, if that scares you, let's look at the jump from 80 to 100% of intermittent generation. That $450 figure will really look nice. That rate goes to $1,612 per megawatt hour. So your bill would be 32 times higher than it is now. $58,000 a year for somebody that's paying $150 a month. I mean, it's beyond belief, and you almost feel like you're sounding, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist. That's not what I'm doing here. These are hard, fast numbers that we're getting from utility providers. that are telling us this. If they're saying this, what's the reality? It could be considerably worse.
In the current, and it's funny because as we're recording this, I just got a Facebook message from somebody. It makes me mad that our electricity is intentionally off. That's somebody who's in Bismarck. Another person in email, Rob, I saw the headline regarding rolling blackouts and believe we experienced that in Northwest Bismarck this morning. Capital Electric stated on their Facebook page that it was an intentional outage where we were without power from approximately 7:15 to 8:15 this morning. I feel like, Dave, for those of us who have been talking about this for so long and it felt at times like we're just shouting at clouds, I feel like this is kind of the moment where we're bringing home this very real threat. It's happening. Like, this is starting to actually impact people to maybe where they're going to pay attention to this.
Unfortunately, it doesn't feel good to be right in this case.
It doesn't. This is going to sound way weird, Dave. I wish wind worked. I wish it worked the way its proponent said it did. Because if it did, that would be magical. The problem is it just doesn't. And what does work is coal. And nothing against coal, by the way. I mean, I'm not saying that because I dislike coal. I think we can do coal well, and it's got a proud history here. And I love the coal companies that are doing a great job. And especially here in North Dakota, they're very responsible people. It just frustrates me that we've gotten to this point in what is arguably one of the most prosperous societies on earth. Americans are waking up to mandatory power outages, like we're living in some third world country.
Coal has done it so well for so long, and if you look at let's use North Dakota coal, and historically maybe 75% plus percentage of our generation has been from coal, and you look at the air quality in North Dakota, the ambient air quality. And the fact that North Dakota ranks always in top handful of states for air quality with coal. And it's the narrative that's been massaged to fit the agenda. And people claim that coal is dirty. It's not dirty. And carbon, for crying out loud, carbon is the second most prevalent element in our human body behind oxygen as far as mass is concerned. Carbon's a naturally occurring element. And it's becoming, or has become, a commodity. We use it in, let's use an example of carbonated beverages, CO2. Well, let's just stop drinking Coke, and then we fix our carbon problem. Carbon is not the problem. The agenda is the problem, and the fact that we're massaging the narrative to fit the agenda. We need to actually talk about facts, not feel-good rhetoric.
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have just bought into the mythology. I wrote a column this morning, and I compared it to the subprime housing market, where once upon a time, the political class felt that if we promoted home ownership, we'd get better citizens, right? They looked at homeowners, and homeowners tended to be pretty prosperous, pretty law-abiding, pretty stable people. And they said, okay, well, if we had more homeowners in our society, then it would have more prosperity and stability and good taxpayers and all those things. The fundamental mistake being that homeownership is a product of being a responsible person, not the cause.
That's right.
But regardless, they decided we're gonna put in place all sorts of policies to promote this outcome that we want. The outcome being homeownership. And so the bank started making loans to people, home loans to people who weren't getting them before, and those people started buying houses they couldn't afford before. And before you know it, we had a subprime mortgage market. And all the smart people, until it collapsed, all the smart people were telling us everything was fine. This is fine. Yeah. Until one day it wasn't. And I look at the energy markets, and I can't help but feel we're in the same position where, again, last week we had wind power people before the legislature where you serve telling us grid reliability is not an issue. Last week. Now this week, grid reliability is an issue.
Yeah. Well, I've got a quote by a representative of the utility shareholders in North Dakota. And this should indicate that we want to consider what is at stake. It goes like this. The state's grid is both adequate and reliable for the time being. And worries of rolling brownouts are baseless. We don't have the concern because we know we have both the resource, adequacy, and reliability. We feel these fears at this moment are unfounded. Talking about the chickens coming home to roost, that's the best example we can come up with, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. And again, I continue to get emails from people who are upset about the rolling blackouts that we were just told weren't something to be concerned about. So where do we go from here, Dave?
Well, that's a great question. We have the ERC up in Grand Forks at UND. I mean, what a phenomenal resource. We need to continue, and we need to keep the status quo. And we can't afford to shut down any more coal plants. We know that it's dispatchable power. Not only is it dispatchable power, it's clean, it's affordable, it's on 24/7, 365. We can rely on it and continue to operate everything that we need to operate in our society while we look at other options. But to throw an intermittent resource out there just as a feel-good without it actually being effective or impactful, that just doesn't make any sense. Why would we do that? Why would we throw away everything that we've, how we've gotten to this point in our society? Let's not throw that away just because it fits the agenda. Let's take a look at what we really need, and especially with demand going forward, we know that it's going to be increasing. Everybody says EVs are the future, all of these other things,
and they may well be. I rather like
I
rather like our modern electronic. I say that as somebody. I work in a digital space, right? I work. I got into politics writing a blog. I have always been. I've been repairing computers as a hobby since junior high school. My kids have tablets. I have a Kindle. We stream all of our, all of this stuff runs on electricity. I think electric cars are cool. And you know who else does? The Lignite Energy Council in North Dakota, who's bought a Tesla. They've been driving around because they love the idea of people using more electricity. And I think we can get there, and we can have cars like Tesla, which maybe aren't quite practical yet for most people, but I think they're going to get there. I think there's a lot of cool stuff we could do. The problem, though, is we have these we have the political class, and we have a whole lot of activists who are trying to push us to things before we're ready for them, and it doesn't make a darn bit of sense.
Let me offer
go ahead.
I'd like to offer a story, and kind of just came to mind, but several years ago, during an election for a public service commissioner, there was a candidate that was running that I asked this candidate what their position was on the saturation point on intermittent sources of electrical generation in North Dakota. Here's the answer. We are there now. Now, this was it 2016? Anyway, answer was, we are there now. We cannot afford to add additional intermittent sources at a cost to our base load. And this was a person that had lots of experience with rural electric cooperatives, knew the power industry. This wasn't somebody that was just shooting from the hip. And we've continued to add intermittent resources at a cost to our base load. We can't afford to keep doing that.
No, we can't. And especially because I think maybe the useful metaphor to people is wind power and coal power are not interchangeable commodities, like you said. And that's one of the things, because right now I see some of the spin out there of people trying to say, well, it's not wind, it's natural gas shortages. But that's part of the thing, right? That was the big push, was that natural gas was going to be the stepping stone between us and wind energy. And we're regulating the coal industry out of the market, so we're shifting over to natural gas plants. But now, my problem with that is natural gas is a volatile market. Oil is we all know how volatile the oil and gas markets are. We watch them all the time. North Dakota's the budget decisions you're making in Bismarck are colored in no small part by the fact that you're trying to prognosticate an extremely volatile oil market. It's something that we live with here in North Dakota, where we have a commodity-based economy. So this idea that we can just switch to natural gas, or that natural gas, well, that's part of the problem too. is, we also use natural gas to heat our homes, which I think is what's driving a lot of the shortages in the southern part. Everybody's turning up their thermostat all of a sudden, and now the people, the gas plants that power that heat homes need that gas, and it's not as available for electricity generation.
Yeah, it's a combination of things, and that always happens when you see these types of weather events. We saw it with the polar vortex in the Twin Cities. So you have a lower flow of gas, you have higher demand for heat, and across the board from industrial, commercial, and residential customers. And so you don't have enough gas, and that starts going offline, increasing the demand on the other traditional energy sources. So it isn't just one thing; it's a combination of things, and it always is. I mean, but it's going to continue to get progressively worse unless we stop and take a look at what we're doing and reverse some of the trends that we've got. You talk about the volatility of gas, and I hate to keep going back to this Excel report, but they had a slide in this report that showed the volatility of price of nat gas for their customers, and it fluctuated 60% in a 4-year period. Now, if that isn't something that scares the heck out of you, how would you like to have your electricity bill be $150 one month and have it be $250 the next month, and on and on and on? The utilities need to be able to plan ahead, and that's the nice thing about our baseload, our traditional baseload of either coal or nuclear, is that we know what the fuel costs are going to be,
right,
and they're going to be steady.
Well,
that's something that the utilities can plan for.
That fundamental, that's been one of the spins, as I've been hearing, like down there's some coal plants iced up too, and maybe that's the case. I mean, coal plants are not invulnerable to things, but here's the difference between coal and wind: is you can't squeeze any more electrons out of a wind turbine if the wind's not blowing. There's nothing you can do. Right? It's the wind's either going to blow or it's not going to blow, and if it ain't blowing, you're not getting anything. A coal plant can generate a certain amount of electricity, and up to a point, if you need more electricity from that coal plant, they could just step on the accelerator and deliver more electricity.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
Here's the other odd part of this, and so you have a situation where your wind isn't producing, your coal is, and they're ramping up power. We have additional demand. Now we have the additional demand from the wind facility that needs to be able to heat their turbines because they're not operating, and they have all kinds of issues with gearboxes and blades and lubricants, etc. So they're actually a demand of power rather than a producer.
I've heard stories right here in North Dakota in the past week where they've been hauling diesel generators out to wind turbines to provide electricity that the wind turbines can't. And not electricity per se for the grid. We're not putting diesel generators, not like that. But basically, sometimes they're being used to like heat to try to keep the turbines warm enough to operate. But it's just not working. And in any given moment, I haven't looked this morning, but yesterday I looked. Wind's not providing. If you look at when we're in this deep freeze, and you could go right on the websites for MISO or SPP, and you could see what their fuel mix is in any given moment. And it ain't wind that we're leaning on.
Yeah. And you look at today, and you look at the fuel mix on MISO, and MISO mix, I think before we started this call, was roughly 5%, and I think 55% coal. So wind at 5, coal at 55, and they're supposedly on parity as far as capacity. Both are on 4,000 megawatts, at least in the state of North Dakota, not on MISO. But regardless. And you look at what the wind forecast is doing, and that's going down. So somebody else is going to have to pick up that small percentage that wind actually did provide. But then the other component to this is pricing, and you've seen the price spikes. ERCOT, which is the grid operator in Texas, has a cap at $9,000 a megawatt hour, which is 300 times what normal is. They capped that. Well, there were plants in North Dakota yesterday where the peak was, believe it or not, $47,000, where it typically is $30 to $40. So, when you're looking at 1,500 times the typical cost, just because of the lack of resiliency in the grid and the demand that was put on it. And still we have the rolling blackouts and rolling brownouts.
Yeah. Well, it's a remarkable situation, and I think you're right. I think right now the first thing we need to do is put a pin in any of these pushes to close down any more of our baseload generation. We can't afford it. We cannot go that direction any further. That needs to be stopped immediately. And I don't know.
Unfortunately, it has been a political ploy up to this point, and I hate to say this, but it appears as though our utilities are complicit in this. You know, they're taking this and they're taking the highly subsidized so-called green electrons, and which impacts our baseload providers. It's not a level playing field. We need to provide a level playing field, and bonus the resiliency and reliability of our baseload people.
Well, that's right. I think when we're talking about when we're pricing some of these, and let's be honest, this isn't an entirely your utility company is not an entirely free market. You can't decide. You and I couldn't get together and start our own utility company and compete with the other people, right? The market just doesn't work like that. Not for this. But I do think that there's something we've got to stop treating wind energy as if it were an equivalent thing to coal energy. These are not equivalent things. They are fundamentally different. I mean, at the end, when the electricity comes down the line, they'll both charge an iPad. But the way they're produced, the way we rely on them, they are fundamentally different things. So we need reality to...
Yeah, I'm not sure if you watched Tucker Carlson last night, but he said it best. Wind energy is only something you can support if you don't know much about it.
Yeah.
You know, I've spent a lot of the last 3.5, 4 years learning about the pitfalls of intermittent generation. It doesn't work.
We're all getting a lesson. We're all getting a lesson in intermittent energy right now.
No doubt.
Well, Dave, thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and good luck in Bismarck.
Well, we could do a day-long call on this subject matter. I appreciate the opportunity to get it out there. Thanks, Rob.